People often ask the same question. Why didn't she leave sooner? It sounds simple, logical, almost obvious, but it's the wrong question. Because the real question isn't why she stayed. It's what made her believe staying was the only option. Most women don't stay because they don't see the pain. They stay because they do see it and slowly learn how to live around it. They stay because leaving doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like loss, like failure, like stepping into the unknown without a map. And when you're already hurting, the unknown feels more dangerous than familiar pain. So before we judge, before we label her choices as weakness, we need to understand something deeper. Staying is rarely about a single decision. It's a psychological process, a slow, quiet one. And once you understand how it works, you stop asking, why did she stay? You start asking, how did she survive for so long? Let's be clear about this first. Women who stay in painful situations are not stupid. They are not blind, and they are not unaware. In fact, many of them are deeply perceptive. They notice the shifts in tone, the change in energy, the moments when something feels off. But knowing something hurts does not automatically make leaving easy, because emotions don't follow logic. You can understand that something is damaging and still feel deeply attached to it. You can recognize red flags and still remember the good days. You can feel pain and still hold hope in the same breath. For many women, staying is not about ignoring reality. It's about trying to make sense of it. They ask themselves questions like, am I overreacting? Is it really that bad? Maybe this is just how relationships are. What if it gets better? These questions are not denial. They are attempts to protect something meaningful. Because walking away doesn't just mean leaving pain. It also means leaving memories, shared dreams, versions of the future that once felt real. And grief doesn't start when something ends. It often starts while you're still inside it. So when a woman stays, it's often because she's already grieving, quietly, internally, while still trying to hold things together. To understand why women stay, we need to talk about attachment. Human beings don't bond logically. We bond emotionally. And emotional bonds don't break just because something becomes painful. In fact, pain can sometimes make the bond stronger. This is where psychology becomes uncomfortable, but important. When a relationship alternates between care and hurt, love and disappointment, connection and distance, the nervous system becomes confused. It starts to associate relief with moments of closeness and pain with moments of separation. This creates something called emotional attachment to inconsistency. The good moments don't erase the bad ones, they interrupt them. And that interruption creates hope. Hope becomes a coping mechanism because believing it might get better is often less painful than accepting this is how it is. There's also fear. Fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of being judged. For many women, leaving doesn't feel like strength. It feels like risk. And when you've already invested time, love, and energy, walking away can feel like erasing yourself. So staying becomes a way to preserve meaning, not because it's healthy, but because it feels familiar. And familiarity feels safe, even when it hurts. Most women don't wake up one day and decide to endure pain. It happens gradually. It starts with small compromises. You forgive something you didn't expect to forgive. You explain behavior you didn't expect to justify. You lower expectations just to keep the peace. At first, it feels temporary. I'll just get through this phase. They didn't mean it. And sometimes that's true. But over time, the exceptions become patterns, and patterns shape reality. You begin to adjust yourself. You choose your words carefully. You suppress certain emotions. You avoid certain topics. Not because you're weak, but because you're trying to survive emotionally. You learn what causes tension and what keeps things calm. And slowly, you become very skilled at minimizing yourself. This is the part people don't see. They don't see the mental calculations, the emotional monitoring, the constant effort to keep things from falling apart. They only see that you stayed. But staying was not passive. It was active. It was exhausting. It required constant adaptation. And over time, this kind of survival changes how you see yourself. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop listening to discomfort. You stop asking for more, because asking feels dangerous. And when survival becomes the priority, self-expression becomes a luxury. The cost of staying is rarely immediate. It accumulates quietly. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in pieces. You stop expressing certain thoughts because they lead to conflict. You stop sharing certain feelings because they're dismissed. You stop expecting support because it feels unreliable. And eventually, you stop recognizing your own needs. This is one of the most painful parts, not the relationship itself, but the internal disconnection it creates. You begin to doubt your perceptions. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I expect too much. Maybe this is normal. But deep down, something feels wrong. Your body reacts before your mind does. Fatigue, tension, emotional numbness. These are not weaknesses. They are signals. Signals that something inside you is being ignored for too long. And yet, many women continue to stay, not because they don't feel the cost, but because acknowledging it fully would require a decision they're not ready to make. Leaving is not just an action, it's an identity shift, and identity shifts are terrifying. Here's the reframe most women need to hear. You did not stay because you are weak. You stayed because you were hopeful, because you were loyal, because you believed in repair. Those are not flaws, they are strengths. But strengths without protection can turn against you. The ability to endure is not the same as the obligation to endure. And just because you can tolerate something does not mean you should. This is where compassion matters, not just for women who stay, but for the version of yourself that believed staying was necessary. That version was trying to protect you from loneliness, from regret, from uncertainty. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time, and that deserves understanding, not shame. Awareness does not erase the past, but it does give you choice moving forward, and choice is where healing begins. Leaving is not always the first step. Sometimes the first step is simply seeing clearly, seeing the pattern, seeing the cost, seeing yourself. You don't have to rush. You don't have to justify your timing, but you do deserve honesty, especially from yourself. You are allowed to outgrow situations that once felt necessary. You are allowed to choose peace after choosing endurance for so long. And even if you stayed longer than you wish you had, that does not define you. What defines you is the moment you stop abandoning yourself. Whether that moment comes today or later, it still counts. Because choosing yourself is not a betrayal of love. It's a return to wholeness. and you were always worthy of that.